My wife cheated while I worked 70-hour weeks to save our home, so I left with full custody and everything she tried to keep from me. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and for most of my adult life I truly believed that working myself to the bone was the way a man protected his family, so I took on 70-hour weeks, 2 jobs, constant shifts, and nights where I came home so exhausted I couldn't even taste the dinner left out on the table, because the fear of losing our home felt heavier than the ache in my back or the numbness in my hands. Jenna, my wife, used to meet me at the door with soft smiles and warm hugs, whispering, "I'm proud of you, you're doing so much for us," and I clung to those words like oxygen, convincing myself that all the strain and exhaustion meant something because I believed she was the one person in the world who understood why I pushed myself so hard. The truth is, the foreclosure notices were starting to arrive in thin, hostile envelopes, their paper rough against my fingertips as I opened them under the kitchen's pale yellow light, and every time I read words like "final warning," my chest tightened because all I cared about was keeping a roof over my daughter's head, even if that meant losing pieces of myself in the process. Jenna always told me, "Don't worry, I've got everything here," and she said it with such easy confidence that I let myself believe she was managing the home, the bills, and our daughter's daily life with the same dedication I was throwing into my work, which made me feel like we were a team pushing through a storm together. But cracks started showing, her irritation when I asked simple questions, the way she flipped her phone over whenever I walked into the room, her sudden need for me time, spoken in a tired voice while she avoided my eyes, as if I had become a stranger standing in the doorway rather than the man killing himself to keep us stable. And somewhere deep in my gut, beneath the noise of exhaustion and trust, a small, unsettling feeling began whispering that all my sacrifices were quietly opening a door to something I wasn't ready to face yet. The distance between Jenna and me didn't happen all at once, it crept in quietly, like a draft through a cracked window, and I remember coming home one night, my clothes still smelling like machine oil, only to hear her sigh and say, "You're home early." I just needed some time to myself, in a tone so sharp it made my stomach twist because it felt like I had interrupted something I wasn't supposed to see. I tried to tell myself she was stressed or overwhelmed, but the arguments started stacking up like dirty dishes in the sink, small things at first, like her snapping, "You never listen," or "You're never around," while her fingers tapped anxiously against her phone screen, the blue glow reflecting off her face in a way that made her look like she was living in a world I no longer had access to. Some nights she didn't even bother pretending, walking past me with the scent of a new perfume trailing behind her, her voice clipped as she said, "I'm going out with friends," even though her friends never texted her at midnight, and when I asked who she was meeting, her jaw tightened as she muttered, "Don't start, okay? I deserve a break too." Meanwhile, the neighbors gave me strange looks when I got home early from a shift, like the older woman next door who hesitated before saying, "I saw a car here earlier, thought you were home," but the pity in her eyes made my skin crawl because it felt like everyone else knew something I didn't. I kept trying to bridge the gap with gentle conversations, soft touches on her shoulder, or simple questions like, "Everything okay between us?" only for her to pull away as if my presence annoyed her, leaving me standing alone in a kitchen filled with untouched meals and an eerie, growing silence that didn't belong in a home with 2 parents and a child. Still, even with all the signs right in front of me, I kept telling myself I was imagining things, because admitting otherwise would mean acknowledging a truth that I wasn't ready to let in just yet. The first real punch to the gut came on a Tuesday afternoon when I surprised Jenna by coming home early, stepping into the dim living room with my boots still dusty from work, and instead of greeting me, she nearly jumped out of her skin, slamming her laptop shut so fast the sound echoed through the house as she snapped, "You scared me, why didn't you tell me you were coming home?" in a tone that felt more accusatory than startled. I tried to shake it off, but the next morning I found a crumpled receipt in the bathroom trash, 2 glasses of wine at a place we never went, charged at nearly midnight, and when I asked her about it, she didn't even look up from her phone as she said, "Oh, that." I grabbed drinks with Megan, except Megan had moved states 6 months ago, and the lie landed so awkwardly it felt like a physical bruise forming in my chest. Then there was the cologne, strong, unfamiliar, expensive, lingering on one of our blankets like a stranger had been wrapped in it, and when I held it up and asked, "Whose scent is this?" Jenna rolled her eyes and muttered, "Probably from the laundromat," even though I knew she hadn't taken laundry out in weeks, and her voice trembled at the edges just enough to make my skin buzz with suspicion. Even the house felt different, pillows shifted, a wine bottle half hidden behind the toaster, the faint imprint of someone's weight on the couch cushions. All small things but together creating a strange, suffocating atmosphere like I was walking through a home staged for someone else. Every time I tried to talk to her, she dodged the conversation, brushing past me with irritated sighs or saying, "You're overthinking," while her phone stayed glued to her hand, the screen always tilted away from me as if it held a secret she guarded more fiercely than our marriage. And with every sign stacking on top of the last, the knot in my stomach tightened until it felt impossible to breathe, like I was standing on the edge of a truth that was about to swallow me whole if I dared to look directly at it. The night I finally broke was when I sat alone at the kitchen table, the only light coming from the flickering overhead bulb, and I made the decision no husband ever wants to make. I set up a small, discreet camera in the living room, telling myself it was just for peace of mind, even though my hands were shaking because deep down I already knew I wasn't looking for reassurance, I was looking for confirmation of the worst. 2 days later, after a long shift that left my body aching and my eyelids heavy, I opened the footage on my phone and my entire world tilted when I saw Jenna walk through the front door with a man following behind her, laughing softly as she brushed her hair back in a way she hadn't done for me in months, and hearing her whisper, "Relax, he won't be home until late," felt like a knife twisting slowly under my ribs. I thought maybe it was some stranger, maybe someone she met recently, someone who didn't know me, but when the man stepped fully into frame and turned his head, I felt the blood drain from my body because it was Chris, my coworker, the guy who always asked about my hours, my shifts, my schedule, saying things like, "Man, you work too hard," while smirking like he had some private joke I wasn't a part of. Seeing him in my home, on my couch, in the space where my daughter played and spilled crayons and laughed, made the room around me spin as the audio picked up Jenna's voice murmuring, "We've got time, he won't be back for hours," and I swear I could taste metal on my tongue from how hard I was clenching my jaw. I replayed the clip over and over, each time noticing new details, the way she touched his arm, the way he made himself comfortable, the way she smiled at him with a softness I hadn't seen in so long that I almost forgot what it looked like, until my vision blurred and my fingers went numb. And as I sat there in that dark kitchen with the screen glowing coldly in my hands, a sickening realization settled in my chest. The very hours I worked to save my family had given them the perfect window to destroy it. The first time I confronted Jenna, I remember standing in the doorway of our dimly lit living room, my phone still warm in my hand from replaying the footage one last time, and I said her name so quietly it felt like a prayer, "Jenna, we need to talk." She looked up, startled at first, and then her eyes narrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line as she asked, "Talk about what?" in that way people do when they're trying to sound casual while their whole body is screaming guilt. I held the phone out toward her, my fingers trembling, and whispered, "Don't lie to me. I know everything," and for a moment, she froze, eyes darting, lips quivering, before she laughed, a short, harsh sound, and said, "Everything? You're overreacting, it's not what you think," though her voice betrayed her as it wobbled against the silence of our home. The confession came in fragments, broken sentences, and frantic gestures. She admitted it had been going on for months, that she felt lonely while I worked, that it just happened when Chris was around, and each word struck me like a hammer, reverberating through my chest as I struggled to breathe through the betrayal. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel the emptiness clawing at my insides, but instead I stood frozen, tasting iron and bile, feeling the weight of every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I thought we were building a family being ripped apart by someone I loved more than myself. And as she fell to her knees, begging me not to leave, saying, "I can fix this, we can still be a family," I realized the terrifying truth settling over me like ice. The life I thought I was saving had already been stolen, and the fight to reclaim it was only beginning. Within 48 hours, Jenna transformed from remorseful to manipulative, as if the confession had been a strategy rather than a breaking point, and I remember coming home one evening to find her pacing the living room, phone pressed to her ear, saying, "Yes, he's never here, it's like he doesn't care," in a voice dripping with false despair that made my stomach churn. She began telling anyone who would listen that I was an absent father, that I worked too much, that I ignored her emotional needs, while I buried myself in more shifts, exhausted, trying to keep the house and bills afloat, feeling like I was being punished for caring too much. One morning, I overheard her on a call with my parents, whispering, "He's not the man you think he is, he's distant, cold, and our daughter deserves better," and I felt a physical ache, as if every bone in my body had been pried apart, because the people I trusted were now hearing a version of me I didn't recognize. Even the neighbors subtly changed, the way the male woman lingered in the driveway, the way the elderly couple next door avoided eye contact, and I realized that Jenna had spun a story where I was the villain in my own life, all while she smiled sweetly in public, the picture of the betrayed wife. At night, I sat on the edge of our daughter's bed, listening to her soft breathing, tasting the bitter aftertaste of betrayal, and whispered, "I won't let her lose what's rightfully hers, or mine," knowing that any misstep could give Jenna the leverage she was desperately trying to fabricate. And as I watched her retreat into our bedroom, closing the door with a quiet click that sounded louder than any scream, I understood that the battle wasn't just about my marriage, it was about survival, and that surviving meant uncovering the full extent of the deception she had been carefully weaving around me. I thought the betrayal couldn't get worse, but then I opened our joint bank account to check the bills, only to find hundreds of dollars missing, transfers I didn't recognize, payments to places I hadn't even heard of, and my chest tightened as I realized Jenna had been quietly draining our savings while I slaved away to keep us afloat. When I confronted her, standing in the narrow hallway where the dim light barely reached the peeling wallpaper, I asked, "Why are these withdrawals happening?" And she looked up with wide eyes, feigning shock, whispering, "I was just covering things. Don't worry about it." But her trembling hands betrayed the lie, and I felt bile rise in my throat. I dug deeper, tracing transactions to hotel rooms, luxury stores, and payments to that coworker, Chris, the very man she'd brought into our home, and every discovery punched me in the stomach like a storm I couldn't outrun, leaving me dizzy and shaking on the kitchen floor. It hit me that she had been sabotaging not just my trust but our financial stability, turning my tireless work into a weapon against me, and I could almost hear the whisper of irony in the silence. The hours I spent trying to save our family had built the stage for her deception. I remember sitting at the table, the fluorescent light buzzing above, staring at the spreadsheet of betrayal, feeling both fury and despair, and muttering to myself, "She's trying to take everything from me," and she almost did, while my daughter played obliviously in the next room, laughing with toys that were supposed to be safe under our protection. And as the reality sank in that her manipulations had been quietly escalating behind the scenes, I realized this evidence was no longer just proof of betrayal, it was the key to turning the tables, and the moment I understood that, a cold clarity settled over me. The fight to reclaim my family and my life was about to begin. After nights of staring at the evidence, I finally walked into a lawyer's office, the smell of old leather and paper filling my nose, and explained everything: her affair, the financial drain, the constant lies, and the lawyer listened with a calm intensity that made my chest loosen slightly, as if hope could exist in the ruins of my trust. He laid it out plainly: "We have enough here for full custody, asset protection, and to show financial misconduct. But you need to gather everything: videos, messages, receipts, witness accounts, and don't let her manipulate the narrative." I nodded numbly, my hands curling into fists, feeling both exhaustion and the first sparks of control in weeks. I went home and meticulously collected screenshots, downloaded messages, printed bank statements, and even labeled the videos from the living room camera, each piece stacking like bricks in a fortress I was building to protect what was mine and my daughter's. I remember sitting in our silent house, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of cars on the street filling the air, running through each detail in my head, knowing that exposing the truth would shatter Jenna's carefully constructed facade in ways she never imagined. The texts from Chris, once deleted, were suddenly retrievable from backups, and reading his confessions of guilt and complicity sent a mix of vindication and nausea through me, as if the universe was finally acknowledging the betrayal that had been eroding my life piece by piece. By the time I left the house that night, the streetlights casting long shadows across the driveway, I felt a strange calm settle over me, like the storm had been charted, the battleground mapped, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I knew that the fight to reclaim everything she tried to take was no longer just emotional, it was a calculated, unstoppable plan. It all came to a head one afternoon when I came home from a 12-hour shift to find Jenna in the living room, diaper bag in hand, coat over her shoulders, and our daughter in her arms, saying, "I need a break, we're going away for a while," in a tone that sent a chill straight down my spine. My throat went dry, and I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as I demanded, "Jenna, where are you taking her? You can't just leave like this, but she ignored the panic in my voice, muttering, I deserve this, and she'll be fine, you're never home anyway, twisting my own sacrifices into an accusation. I remember the fear that hit me like a wave, the metallic taste of adrenaline on my tongue, as I stepped closer, trying to keep my voice steady. If you leave with her without telling me, the police will be involved, you know that, right? And for the first time, her eyes flashed with panic, a crack in her otherwise confident facade. She froze, hesitated, then whispered, almost pleading, you're controlling, you don't trust me, and in that instant, I realized she would risk traumatizing our daughter rather than relinquish control, and my stomach twisted into knots of helplessness and rage. The room felt impossibly small, the walls closing in, and I could hear our daughter giggling softly, completely unaware of the storm erupting around her, and I clenched my fists, tasting the bitter combination of fear, betrayal, and the overwhelming responsibility of keeping her safe. By the time she finally set our daughter down, muttering under her breath, you'll see, this isn't over, I felt the icy clarity of rock bottom settle over me, the moment when everything I had loved and fought for seemed like it could be ripped away in an instant, and I knew that protecting my child and reclaiming my life was no longer optional, it was a battle I had to win. The day of the hearing, I remember walking into the courtroom, the polished wood floors reflecting the harsh overhead lights, the smell of ink and old paper filling my nostrils, and feeling my hands shake just slightly as I clutched the folder containing every piece of evidence I had meticulously gathered over weeks of sleepless nights. Jenna tried to wear the face of the injured wife, her voice soft and trembling as she told the judge, he's never home, he doesn't care about us, but I could see the cracks, her shifting eyes, the occasional glance at her phone, the subtle tightening of her jaw whenever she thought I wasn't looking. When it was my turn, I laid everything out calmly, the video footage of her affair, the bank statements showing the hidden withdrawals, the text messages from Chris admitting everything, and each piece landed like a hammer on the narrative she had spent months carefully crafting, exposing the truth in sharp, undeniable clarity. I remember the judge leaning forward, scanning the documents, asking questions, and for a brief moment, I held my breath as my heart pounded in my ears, the courtroom silent except for the rustle of papers and the occasional creak of a wooden chair. Chris was called as a witness, and the moment he admitted to being with her in our home, a shiver ran down my spine, a mix of vindication and disbelief, because the full extent of her deceit had finally been laid bare in front of everyone, leaving her defenses crumbling like dry sand slipping through fingers. By the time we left the courtroom that day, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows painted long, sharp shadows across the floor, and I felt an almost surreal mix of relief, exhaustion, and triumph. The storm of lies, betrayal, and manipulation had been confronted, and for the first time in months, I could see a path forward, though the battle was far from over. After the court ruling, I remember standing in our quiet home, the faint hum of the heater filling the empty spaces where tension used to live, and feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years, because for the first time, the home I had fought to save was truly mine again. I used the assets awarded to me to pay off the mortgage in full, the sound of the final payment confirmation pinging in my inbox like a bell signaling freedom, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without the heavy cloud of betrayal pressing down on me. Jenna tried to contact me after, leaving messages dripping with desperation, I miss our family, we can fix this, but I ignored them, walking past her words like shadows that no longer had the power to darken my path, because my focus was entirely on protecting and raising my daughter in peace. I made sure that Chris, the coworker who had betrayed every ounce of trust, was legally barred from having any contact with my family, and knowing that he could never threaten us again brought a cold, quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with reclaiming control over our lives. The first night I put my daughter to bed afterward, I lingered in her doorway, listening to her soft, even breathing, smelling the faint lavender of her sheets, and realized that the real victory wasn't in proving Jenna wrong or punishing her, it was in creating a safe, stable, and happy life for the two of us that she could never touch again. And as I turned off the lights and closed the door behind me, I whispered to myself, a quiet smile tugging at the corner of my lips, we survived, we're free, and nothing she tried to steal from us could ever take that away. Finally letting the sense of justice, closure, and empowerment wash over me like sunlight breaking through a storm that had lasted far too long.